Hello, everyone. Welcome to Comfort Food, a podcast all about the arts and media that people love and the people that love them. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest. He's the host and founder of Jump and Shoot, a Mega Man podcast, Joey Agliata.
Hello.
Did I get your last name right?
Yeah, you did actually. I guess if you're
Let's go.
being really annoying, you can say that it's like
Agliata.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't have to explain the BS L, so that thank you.
Yeah, because GL in Italian is weird.
Yeah. It's refreshing to hear that right off the bat.
Thank you. So Joey, today we're going to be talking about a game that, from my understanding, is very special to you. What are we talking about today?
We are talking about Bubsy 3D. Is that it? No.
No, it's Mega Man X.
Oh.
It is Mega Man X. I think in every podcast that we've recorded together so far, you've found a place to fit in a Bubsy 3D joke.
Dude, that's the only thing I'm here for.
So, Joey, why don't you tell... Obviously, you're like the host of a Mega Man podcast. You're like a speedrunner for a few different like Mega Man games. You like had the world record for the 11 demo for a little bit. So tell me a little bit about your history with the Mega Man franchise leading up to Mega Man X.
First of all, I feel like an imposter because I want to add like an asterisk to everything that you said, because like it's all right. So I'm not like a speed runner, but I definitely dabbled with it. Like I tried with Mega Man X a long time ago, and I was like when YouTube first came out and stuff. I tried recording runs, and I would time my runs, and I was like working on tech that other people were doing and just trying to refine that and do my own thing. But I wasn't like consistent, And the other asterisk is that my podcast started as a Mega Man podcast, and then my rampant ADD prevented that, so it became a more general gaming podcast. And the Mega Man 11 demo thing, I think that is actually true. I think my run was on there for a while. I think it's on YouTube still. So we got
I think so, because I think that was like what I saw first when I subscribed to your YouTube channel.
Oh yeah, when I first met you. That's right. Yeah. So it's probably still there in the ether. Oh, sorry.
So
I had so many
no worries.
asterisks that I forgot what you. Yes, the game is special to me. Concluding podcast now.
So how did you, like, what was your first exposure to Mega Man? Like how did you get into the franchise?
You know what? I'm actually going to put that on you before I answer this, because I'm really curious.
Okay, so I got into Mega Man just like I got into F-Zero, Metroid, Kirby, and basically every other like classic Nintendo franchise, and it's through Super Smash Bros. On the Wii U and 3DS. When Mega Man was announced, I quite literally, I'm pretty sure I thought it was Astro Boy.
Well, that was his original design. It was sort of a ripoff of Astro Boy, or greatly influenced by Astro Boy. So that's crazy.
But yeah, so I thought he was Astro Boy, and I was like, oh, who's this Mega Man guy? And then I fast forward like a year or two, and I got like an eShop gift card for my birthday. And so using that, I picked up on the Wii U Virtual Console, rest in peace, I picked up a ton of like classic games. So I got like F-Zero, Kirby, Super Metroid, and Mega Man 1.
Ooh.
Which is like a really good lineup.
Yeah.
And I think Mega Man, the original Mega Man, is probably the one of those that I played the most in that specific setting. Because it was always just that kind of thing that I would like, maybe make a save state and chip away at like for like a couple hours while I'm like watching Archer or something. But it was always like kind of one of those things that I was really casual about. I never really like tried to beat it. I was just like kind of like playing it over and over again. And then, obviously as time went on, I realized like, oh, this is like a pretty impactful franchise. And so, I played Mega Man 2 and on the NES Classic, and then eventually I picked up the Mega Man Legacy Collection on Switch, played 3, and then I also got the X Collection, and I just beat that this year. So
wait, you beat all
Or
8
just
games?
X, just X,
Oh, just
just
X
X.
one. Okay.
Oh man, I don't know if I have what it takes to beat all the X games.
I think if you could beat one, you could beat all of them.
Okay.
Maybe except X6, because that, oh man, and X7
'Cause
just sucks. But
I
I
know
think you
there's
can do it.
some real bullshit in some of those games.
Oh yeah, for sure. But that's interesting that the first one was also your first one. So
Yeah,
that's
because
cool.
I didn't really know. Like obviously, I was like what 15, 14. So I was like I was completely uninitiated to like a lot of like classic games. So I was just like, Mega Man 1. Sure, let's start at the beginning.
So that was my first too. Uh,
Hmm.
but I mean, I'm an old bastard. But despite that, Mega Man One was a little before my time because I was born in '88,
Hmm.
and so I definitely missed. Like by the time I was able to process memories and like have coordination enough to play video games, or at least attempt to, uh, you know,
Hmm.
I think Mega Man 3 or 4 were out, but it was the first
Okay.
one that I played, and I definitely sucked at it a lot. I mean, unsurprisingly, but I kind of just like dabbled in it. I really like the art style. I think that something about the colors and stuff was just really appealing to a little kid, and it just seemed cool, man.
Yeah, I think for as far as NES games go, at least, like I think the Mega Man series uses color super well. Even compared to something like Mario or Castlevania, which also I think are pretty visually like appealing games on there. Like I think the Mega Man games have aged visually super well.
Oh yeah, I feel like that's one of the quintessential side-scrolling action games in terms of visual. So,
Oh, for
and
sure.
everything is really
Yeah.
clear, which was good for me because I always bring this up, but I'm like blind as hell, literally.
Hmm.
So, like, any game that's has that level of visual clarity is just an added bonus in my book.
Yeah. Hmm.
But I remember, I want to say it was 93 or maybe 94. I think it was 93. Nintendo Power did a preview for Mega Man X. And I saw this and I was like, oh my God, that's Mega Man, but he's cooler. And I couldn't beat the first Mega Man when I was like 6 or 5, whenever, however old I was at this time.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, you know what? This is going to be the game. I'm going to beat it. And I was like super hyped about the release as much as like a little kid who couldn't sort of barely understand what video games were. Uh,
Hmm.
and then I played the crap out of it. I'd start it up. I'd get past the intro stage and die a bunch of times. And I would get the Dash Boots and Chill Penguin stage, but it took me like probably about a year and a half to beat it.
Hmm.
And I tried to use Game Genie codes and stuff to beat it, but I just like couldn't. I actually couldn't figure out the Game Genie. I think that was harder than anything else.
How so for the Game Genie, was it like a code that you could put in to get specific power-ups and like skip certain levels, or was it like a power-up code within each level?
Okay, so because Mega Man X has that save system, it was
Hmm.
twofold. So it was like there were the Game Genie codes that sort of, like hacked your game or like put in infinite lives or so on, make you unable
Hmm.
to be killed. And then there was just the password system that was implicit in the games that you can skip directly to the Sigma stages if you know the password, or which Nintendo Power had.
Huh.
And they also had like walkthroughs for each of the stages, so that definitely helped me a lot. I think one of the biggest reasons why I was able to beat games as a kid was because of all the walkthroughs I had access to.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, those guides are so like even like guides in general are so useful, especially for like older games where it's like maybe not as easy to like kind of show what you have to do.
right, and there's always that argument for purity about using a guide doesn't really. It's not like beating the game; it's cheating, etc., etc. But I don't know. I think as a
It still
6 year
requires
old,
skill.
yeah, it still requires execution, especially in Mega Man.
Yeah.
But as a kid, that was an excellent gateway for
Mhm.
me, I guess. And funny enough, this is a good little anecdote. So when I got older to sort of figure out the Game Genie codes and actually get them to work, there's a code that makes you I don't know if it's like just unable to die or just invincible. But there are two fights in that game with Vile that you have to get to like 2 pips of life, or within it's
Mhm.
like 2 to 8 pips of life,
Right.
or like 5% of your HP, whatever it is. And then he like grabs you and
And then.
puts you in chains, and then Zero saves you both times. And
Mhm.
so, but when you can't take damage or the invincibility, whatever, you can't die. You just can't get past the fight.
Oh God.
So that's really
So did
funny.
you ever get like soft locked because of that?
Not soft lock, but if we're talking about getting soft lock, I have soft locked that game so many times, but
Like
because
when?
just there's a glitch that lets you actually funny enough that second Vile fight you can skip, and if you don't do it right, you soft lock the game.
Hmm.
There's also one in Sigma 3 that is skip in Sigma 3 that you can soft lock. So
Mhm.
I've done the former of that like so many times, just accidentally done it.
Mhm. Like just like during speedrunning or just fucking
Just
around with
during
the game?
speed running or just whatever. It's funny. I'm like the least consistent speedrunner in the world. This is why I never like got into it seriously. I'm like a very casual speedrunner. Like I
Mhm.
would say one of every 10 attempts actually goes from like 0 to 100. Like I'll
Yeah.
mess up on something really bad. I'll just be like, screw it, and I'll just turn it off, rather
Well, I
than
think.
just go through it. Like you have the positive mindset of like, oh, whatever, I'll do it next time. I can't do that.
Mhm.
I just get like immediately negative, which is so toxic.
But
So that's
I
why I
do
don't.
I do think that that's like a pretty big driving factor for like what makes speedrunning content so interesting is like not just watching the speedrun, but you see like a bunch of streamers like doing whatever game they're speedrunning, and you see them go through one specific sequence in the game like 80 times, and then they finally get it right.
Yeah, like resets. Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
resets are part of life, no matter how you swing it. You could
Hmm.
be the best speed runner in the world. You're still gonna have a million resets.
So actually, on the topic of speedrunning, how did you get from trying to figure out how to use Game Genie on Mega Man X to speed running the game like 10 years later?
It's a really generic answer, honestly. But it's just I would play that game so many times because for all Mega Man games are designed in that Capcom design philosophy of like the game is really short,
Hmm.
and it's about multiple playthroughs and different ways to play through the levels, different boss orders. So a big part of that was like I love the gameplay so much, and there was so many different ways to go through it, and it being one of the first games I could beat like that were considered like hard or challenging,
Hmm.
it just made me play it a bunch. So growing up, I would play through the game, and my friends who had played Mega Man or had never played it, I would put it on and beat it for them, which sounds like very voyeuristic, but I swear I'm still talking about video games. Um, and I just you know did that enough times to where I can kind of get through it pretty quickly without dying or something like that. And then you set little
Hmm.
challenges, and it becomes more and more. And I think when YouTube first came around and other people were beating the game really quickly, because I didn't really quite know what speedrunning was um, until like 2005 or so, 6 maybe. Um, that's kind of when I started to break it down a little bit more. But
Hmm.
again, I never went like super hardcore into it. So it is what it is.
So kind of going back a little bit, this is a little all over the place, but when you first got like that copy of Nintendo Power and you saw the cooler version of Mega Man, did it feel like uh did it feel like super weird to see Mega Man all of a sudden having so much more like to it, not just visually, but like kind of the different layers that they've seemingly added. The story, the character designs, and just kind of like the detail that they put into it. Because obviously they couldn't really do a lot of that stuff with the NES.
Well, yes. Okay, so one of the things you have to understand about the '90s is that it was always that like Rob Liefeld, like really over the top. Everything had way too much armor. Everything
And
was
lots of
bigger
muscles.
and muscles and
All
bigger
the feet
and
were
badder.
weird.
Right, all the feet were weird. Like, I mean, that is kind of literally what happened. I mean, Mega Man like legs have always been like this really unique design, but so I guess like consistent with the time period. No, it wasn't that weird. It was just like to me, I think I was its exact target audience. Like, it was like this cooler Mega Man. And I have to say that Nintendo Power. I've talked about this. I've talked about this a little bit on on Jump and Shoot before, but I remember that cover of Nintendo Power. It had like a silver. What's that? It's like not embedded, but like
hologram or
no,
holographic.
no, it's like it's got like text. I like it. This is the most simple word, but it's like got like a printed texture of Mega Man on the cover.
Oh, cool!
Silver.
Like I think embossed, maybe.
Embossed, yeah. Okay. Embedded, I say, like an actual dummy. But yeah, it had this like really cool cover. It came with Pogs.
Nice.
Like crappy, like it was like in a cardboard sheet, so it was barely Pogs. They were like cardboard circles that were like slightly laminated, and those were Pogs. And I remember I brought them to school because I guess Pogs were a thing. I don't even remember how to play them. I don't even think you can. I refuse to believe there are actually rules. But I think I like let somebody use my Mega Man Pogs or something, and I just like never got them back.
Oh man!
And I'm still looking for the little fuck who stole my Mega Man X Pogs, because I'm coming for you, and I haven't forgotten you. So yeah, I mean, like that, and just the whole coverage of the game. Like they had these full color maps. Everything looked so vibrant, especially for a kid too, because it was like so easy to follow, and it looked so, it had those like sharp, pointy little edges, but everything was super colorful. Like the sprite work was great. It just felt so fluid and responsive. And to me, like when I first played Mega Man X, I didn't really want to play the classic series ever again.
Understandably, it feels X. Like I think X. I guess I haven't played Zero ZX yet, even though I just got it on Steam. But I think like to me, X controls so well, like probably better than any other version of Mega Man, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is the level design too, though. Zero started adding a lot of different mechanics that are almost like fighting game mechanics. And the first couple X games, though, are super solid in terms of that. And, that's why people... There's this big thing. I don't know if you were following it when it came out, but when the X Legacy Collection came out, there was the issue of input lag in the game.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's not much. It's maybe, I want to say, 7 frames on top of whatever native input lag there is. But, I mean, if you're doing, 2 to 4 frame jumps or 1 to 2 frame jumps, like there's like at least a couple pixel jumps in that game, at least in this route that I do, the little baby speed route that I do. There's only a couple, but they're still there. And like that could really mess you up, man. And not only that, but like it eats inputs. Even if you're not like proficient at it, sometimes it does eat your inputs. And I noticed that a lot of the people who say things like, you don't even notice it. You can't even notice the input lag. It's like, well, I beat the game and I didn't have any problems with it. yeah, right. Like literally, yeah, right. Maybe you beat the game, sure, but like you're not doing those same jumps that you did normally. And you know what? If you can perfectly execute it with no problem, if it's not a big deal, then play Ultimate Online, dude, because then you automatically have an advantage over literally everybody else. If that's the case.
So it still hasn't been like patched out or fixed or anything?
No, a lot of it was, I think, due to the VSync in the game and like just sort of the emulation that was used, and there's a lot of things that we think can or could not influence it. Stuff like maybe this is just placebo, but the backgrounds. Apparently, like the Legacy Collection backgrounds, like little wallpaper backgrounds, apparently those influenced it too. But I haven't really followed that subject since it came out. And we actually did a review on the X Legacy Collections that you, but I don't know if that's been changed. I don't think it has. I think it was just a fundamental issue with the way the games are emulated.
Yeah, that's wild. The only controversy that I knew about that game was that GameStop had Mega Man Zero and ZX collection.
Oh, I was talking about X.
Oh,
the
about
X
X.
Legacy, yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, Mega Man. I saw Mega Man in the wild. I saw that at a GameStop. No, the Zero and ZX collections, I think, are like some of the best ports I've ever seen. Probably the best Mega Man collection in terms of like response and stuff. There's a couple of emulation issues in the games, a little bit, but I think compared to the other collections, it's the most solid. For sure, I would say anyway. I'm not like super proficient at the Zero games, as well. I don't know. Maybe I am a little bit. Maybe like on a casual level, but like not as much as X.
So speaking of emulation, I think for a lot of the people listening, probably I think it's safe to bet that at least some of the people who are listening have never played Mega Man X, or if they have, it's not like the entirety of the game. So, have you what do you prefer to play it on now? Like if you had the option to, like if you were gonna sit down and play it after we're done recording, what like platform or emulator or like system or version of it would you play it on?
Okay, can I preface this with something?
Sure.
I'm very much a convenience person. So I've kind of realized this over the years. Maybe like 10 years ago, I would have had a different answer. But honestly, if I were to play it, I think the ideal way for me is on an emulator. A big part of that, I'm not super into fidelity nerdy stuff. Like I don't have SCART cables. I don't like have a CRT monitor, like a Trinitron that's like super hi-fi. I don't really care that much about it. But I would either play it on a emulator or I would play it on Super Nintendo.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I could play the X, at least the first couple X games on the X Legacy Collection and still have a good time. I just, it all kind of depends on how lazy I'm feeling, really.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I don't have the game on Super Nintendo. I have it on the SNES Classic, though. And I think that emulation's pretty solid. Obviously, I don't really have a point of reference for the original, but that's what I've played it on the most, I think, even though I beat it on the Legacy Collection on Switch.
Nice. Yeah, so I played I actually embarrassed myself with it. I was at my friend's place a couple weeks ago. And they had this SNES Classic and they were playing something. I don't remember what it was. And then he was like scrolling through the games. I was like, "Oh, Mega Man X. Did you ever see me beat that or something like that?" He's like, "No." I was like, "All right." So I just like fired it up and like I went through the intro stage, no problem really. I kind of like I was like noticing like a little bit of issues, but I was like, maybe I'm just rusty, which I probably was. And then I just like died in Chill Penguin stage.
Oh no!
And I like to like something I've never died on, dude. This is why I don't stream this that much. My performance anxiety is so high. And I was like, I think there was input lag, but it was probably his TV. Because it was like probably like a 40 hertz television, and it was probably set in like HDR mode or something. Because I was playing Mario World 2, and I was having a couple issues with that too, and I don't really remember that game ever having input lag. But I have the SNES Classic. I just, for some reason, I've never played X on it. I don't know why.
So,
Oops.
Also, speaking of other, like, SNES games, like, this is very vaguely tangentially related, but did you know about the Hadouken being in X?
Yeah, but I mean,
were you a fan of Street Fighter 2?
I didn't I definitely played Street Fighter after Mega Man X,
Uh-huh.
but I knew about it only because of Nintendo Power.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks, Nintendo Power.
That's interesting because I did not know about the Hadoken until like a friend asked me if I got it after I was like finished beating the game, and I was like, "What? There's a Hadoken in this game?"
Oh yeah, it's busted as shit too.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. It's like a one shot on everything, right?
It's a one shot on everything except the final boss. Pretty
Okay.
Much. So funny story about that Hadoken. As a little kid with my little kid reflexes, I could not really do it consistently.
Uh-huh.
But I knew the input not from Street Fighter, but from Final Fantasy VI.
Huh?
So Final Fantasy VI has a character, Sabin. He has a command that's called Blitz, and it's like all the commands are done like fighting game commands. Like the first attack is like left, right, left. Then the second one is like the quarter circle. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, that's the Aura Blast thing from FF6. Mm-hmm. I called it FF3 at the time because I wasn't like a pedantic 6-year-old. Actually, it's Final Fantasy VI and Rockman X. And by the way, it's not actually Mega Man. X is a different model of robot. If you had paid attention to the intro, then you probably would have known that. So yeah.
So actually, speaking of Rockman X, that's actually accidentally how I beat Mega Man X.
Accidentally?
Yeah.
I'll leave. Thanks for having me, dude. Bye.
Yep. Links to all Joey stuff in the description.
No, don't even do that. It's over.
But yeah, no, I was like fooling around in the X collection, and I don't know. To this day I don't understand what I did because I don't remember anything on the UI indicating that it was Rockman X instead of Mega Man X.
Oh, you put the Japanese version?
I must have accidentally done it, and I started it up, and I was like, why is everything in Japanese? This is not the Mega Man X I remember playing. And I was so confused, but luckily I took enough Japanese to know how to write down the characters into Google Translate, so I got a very rough version of the story down.
That's one of the few games I think I would have had no problem playing in Japanese as a kid. It's actually the version that speedrunners use because the text scrolls faster. Oh. There's a couple like minute differences.
Yeah, there's probably fewer characters too, right?
Yeah. That's why it scrolls faster.
Okay.
Because there's less. But yeah, it saves I think 18 seconds overall, something like that.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, a lot of times that is the case. Like if there's a Japanese version of a game, I'm pretty sure this is the case with Final Fantasy as well. But they'll use that version instead.
I think Breath of the Wild's the same way too. Or it might be either German or Japanese, I think. That Breath of the Wild is
Breath
fastest.
of the Wild speedrun.
Oh my god, they scare me. Have you seen the record for 100% in that game?
Oh no, that's
it's like a 20-hour speedrun.
Jeez. That's wild.
So, what would you say is your favorite level in Mega Man X?
Ooh. God damn, that's a really hard question. I want to say Storm Eagle because I think the whole concept of it is really cool. You're like jumping across these ships that you're blowing up and the music rules, and Storm Eagle's got this really cool design that everybody loves. He's edgy as hell.
Great boss fight too.
Great, the easiest fight ever, but it's so cool. It's just really high octane. And I always hear that's one of those phrases I hear all the time that I just like. It
makes your skin
gives me shivers. Yeah, dude, it's just like high octane. I read that once in a magazine, and I use it all the time. I don't know. But it really is though. Like it's very fast paced and it's just a good stage. That or the intro stage too, because it's such a quintessential staple of game design too. There's so many things about that intro stage that are just wonderful, like the way it teaches you the mechanics through showing rather
Mhm.
than explaining. Just the music. Oh my god, the
Yeah.
atmosphere. It's so good.
And
What
the way
about
it
you? What's your favorite stage?
yeah, I'm inclined to agree. Like Storm Eagle intro stage, and then I also like I like Chill Penguin stage a lot. I think that's just because I like the feeling of starting the game, starting up a new run, and then getting that dash, and then just dashing the whole level.
Yeah.
But other than that, I also really like. Oh, I forget. I think it's Armored Armadillo, the one where you're like riding on stuff a lot of the time. I
Yeah, that's
I
Armored Armadillo.
really like that one too. I don't know what it is. I think it just has like a really good feeling of momentum to it, and that's
Oh
something that I
yeah.
really like in 2D platformers. Like that's why Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is like one of my favorite platformers, is because like it's just so smooth and it flows so well, and I think that applies to a lot of the levels in X, but specifically that one.
Every time I hear just the name Tropical Freeze, I like to imagine Donkey Kong Country is like a soft drink umbrella. Like there's like Tropical Freeze and Baja Blast and
That's
Jungle
the
Juice.
promotion
I
we
don't
were
know.
robbed of.
Yeah,
I would
man.
kill to have a tropical freeze flavored Mountain Dew.
I would be into that, and I don't even like Mountain Dew. But real quick, back to this level design of X. So, I think X is one of the few Mega Man games, especially Mega Man X games, that does gimmicks in an extremely tasteful and really well done way. Like, you have that part in Armadillo stage when you're riding on those spiky platforms and it goes super fast. And then you have a couple things here and there, like the platforms and elevators that are in Storm Eagle stage. And what's another example? The lights being a thing in Spark Mandrill stage, but none of them are ever really. It never feels gimmicky. It never feels annoying. Like, especially compared to a stage like Bright Man in Mega Man 4, which that stage sucks. I hate that stage. Because it does have that gimmick.
Or the balloon one in Mega Man 11.
Oh yeah,
Oh my god.
Bounce Man. Yeah, that's my biggest complaint about that. And I know people love it. I just can't.
No,
I can't.
that is a bad Mega Man level.
I don't want to say it's a bad level. It's just a gimmick I don't like. Like because it is kind of just something about it. Just
It
I
just
don't
feels
like it. I just
inconsistent.
really don't.
And
Yeah,
such a
and
precise game inconsistency is just like I feel so bad.
it also both looks awful and good at the same time. It's really weird. It's probably the most like generic indie game looking stage in that game, but like at the same time there's parts of it you're like, that hit. All right. And it's probably the closest thing to that Mega Man BS of jumping over a platform and an enemy coming out and just knocking you like, oh god, it just disrespect. There's a little bit of disrespect on that stage too.
Yeah, no, yeah. Complaints about Mega Man 11 aside, so how do you go from like obviously speedrunning I guess is content creation on some level, but how do you go from speedrunning Mega Man X to like starting a Mega Man podcast? Like obviously it's Mega Man X isn't the only one, but I remember asking you we talked about this a little bit, but I remember asking you what Mega Man game I should play after the first three, and you were like super emphatically said X, and
Oh yeah. I have feelings about that.
and so it seems to me like that's probably one of the more influential games to you.
Oh, 100%. And thank you for asking these questions because it makes like I'm so used to having to ask questions that it's good to just be asked questions. Plus, it makes me feel important. It feels like you're interviewing me, and I'm like, I'm special.
Yeah, that's
because you want to know this.
that's honestly kind of my approach to like this whole show is like I kind of feel like it's an interview. It's more of an interview series than a podcast because a lot of the times the things we're talking about, obviously, if I love them, that's good, but it's about the guest. and it's that kind of journalistic thing where in an interview or well, I guess in general, but especially when you're writing about someone else, it's not about you, it's about the story and about the person's story. So that's like my mindset to
Ooh,
these, or approach to these rather. But thank you.
that's a good
I'm
approach.
glad you like the format.
Yeah, but it just makes it easy for me too, which is
Mm.
nice. But yeah, in terms of playing Mega Man X, I just think it's such like an easy game to get into. It doesn't ever really feel dated. There's nothing really bullshitty about it. It's bright, it's pretty. The soundtrack rules. Like, I mean, it's a no brainer for me to request that or request people play that next.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I feel like a part of me just wants to say play Mega Man 2, but at the same time, X is just so much easier to make that jump.
Yeah. Also, I think just in like you said in general, X is so approachable. Like, I've said this a ton of times. I don't know if I've talked about this much on the show, but I think the NES era, like as much as people are nostalgic about it, a lot of those games are not approachable. Like I think genuinely there are probably probably like 5% of that library has aged gracefully on the NES, but on the Super
Yeah,
Nintendo,
I think a lot of the games have. It just the philosophy, the design philosophy back then has not. If that makes sense. I know
I
that's
know what
like
you
very
mean.
implicit in the quality of the game. But yeah, it totally is. And I think see, this is why I always liked Mega Man as a series, because if you compare the design philosophy of Mega Man 1 through 6 to the X games and 7, and then even further on, like Mega Man 11, it's pretty much the same thing. You start with 3 lives, you have 8 stages, and then the boss stage. If you lose all your lives, you go back to the beginning of the stage or stage select. So I think that kind of does hit the nail on the head. Like, they were sort of ahead of the curve, and I think I kind of agree about NES games, but I think Mega Man is one of the
Yeah.
exceptions for that exact reason.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's kind of where I was going. Is like Mega Man has aged so gracefully, and taking that formula and then adding speed to it, adding wall jumping to it, adding stuff where you're like charging up a blast to it. It makes I feel so dumb saying this, but it makes Mega Man feel like a next gen experience coming from the NES games.
Yeah, I definitely see that, because just that dash alone really made things really switch things up. It was that, like, that one subtle thing that seems so small that just greatly impacts the entire game, because it's like accuracy is kind of a little bit out the window now, and it's more about movement and like reading a pattern and reacting to a pattern rather than just learning the pattern. It's like Yellow Devil versus Sigma.
Yeah.
I'm serious. Like,
No,
think of
I
it. Like,
agree. I agree with you. I'm just having flashbacks to beating Yellow Devil without knowing about the
the war
glitch.
flashback. Yeah.
Oh my god.
See, I didn't know about that
Me
glitch,
neither.
and I never used it. So I still haven't really used it. I never have. But yeah, I mean, like, that's like the former Yellow Devil is like, it's just rote memorization. There's there's a execution. You have to like jump still and shoot right, but it's not the same as like, okay, so now Sigma's doing this thing, and you have to, like, there's different ways to maneuver around it. Whereas like Yellow Devil, you really either jump or get hit. Like, there's so many more options. So I don't know. Maybe that is a good example. But how about you? Now that you've played a bunch of Mega Man games, what would you recommend to somebody?
I think X is probably like the best. I think either X or 2 is like are the two that I would recommend. I think 2 specifically, like if you get Metal Blade, it becomes super easy. And I know, like, some people aren't super keen on difficult games, especially if they're like older. Like I know a lot of people are increasingly like, I want my games to like feel like comforting to look at and play in and stuff, and not everyone's about the 8-bit aesthetic. I personally don't have a problem with that, but I think two is a good balance of like challenge, but also kind of resembling a lot of the philosophies behind the original Mega Man. Um, and then X I think is the other one that I would recommend because I of the four that I've played right now, X is easily my favorite, or probably my favorite. I think X is my favorite. Um,
Nice.
it's either X or two, but I think X it has like almost a cinematic quality to a lot of it too, which makes it hit really kind of differently. I think, like, it feels
Yeah,
it
it
feels
went
like
from
there's
like
tension.
Astro Boy to Blade
Yeah,
Runner.
it feels like there's tension and energy. Like even from the first stage, from the animation on the title screen and like all the flashing lights and alarms blaring and showing you like all these like specs about X and stuff like that. And so I think that gets you invested and like you understand the premise of it more than just a scroll of text and then it pans up to a building where Mega Man's standing. Not to say that that's
Yeah,
bad
and
because
then
that's like the best title screen ever, but
oh yeah, rules. Yeah, I think Mega Man 2. Ooh, God, that intro. But yeah, there's like this kind of emergent storytelling
Mhm.
with that tension in X that was like very of the times too.
Mhm.
That like super edgy, like action movie esque, very inspired by Blade Runner and mixed with like a Schwarzenegger movie. But I mean, you mentioned the word comfort, which is like the thesis of the series,
Mhm.
right? And I think one of the reasons why X is comforting to not just me, but to other players of the series or anyone who has an attachment to it is because it is very of the 90s.
Mhm.
And it's of the 90s, like in its more innocent stage when it was still like kind of transitioning
Yeah.
from like the some of the more like atmospheric 80s things into like the more like overtly materialistic bright and shiny feel of the 90s.
Mhm.
So it still had a very, I mean it was way more anime looking, I
Yeah,
think, than the
definitely.
classic series, but it was still kind of like almost westernized
Mhm.
in a way, like more rounded features. And I think that that look is very nostalgic, and I think
Mhm.
that a lot of people find comfort in that because it reminds them of being a kid. Its aesthetic is more consistent with stuff that they would see as a kid.
Mhm.
And it's like
And
a lot of
even
people, including myself, say that the X series kind of got a little overly anime, even though it always was to begin with. Even like if you break it down fundamentally,
uh,
it was always very anime. Just that like
it gets a
that
little much.
Yeah, and but I think that like a lot of that was just technology. A lot of it was audience. A lot
Mhm.
of the look of the game was very much trying to appeal to a new market, which was the West. And I
I
think
thought you were about to say the weebs.
X, the weebs in the West, the Western weebs. But I think X did a huge number on selling side scrollers for the Super Nintendo
Uh-huh.
because it showed so much potential, and a lot of games that came after it definitely ripped it off. It's funny because after X came out, that's when 7 was in
Mhm.
production. I believe 7 came out like right after X2 or right before it. And so it was funny that they went to X and then pulled back for a second to like try to retroactively apply that new polish to the classic
Mhm.
series because it seemed to be such a successful kind of
Mhm.
thing. And I don't know. I don't know if Mega Man will ever really hit that high again.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Maybe that's the cynic in me, the nostalgia chasing cynic. But like, I don't know. I think it was in a lot of ways it was very much of
Uh-huh.
the times, and I think that that's why like you see people talking about it so lovingly and why it's so celebrated in
Mhm.
that
And I think
respect.
even
And I
even the music
hmm?
in it feels so much like it reminds me of the song Danger Zone. Like so much of it is like
Yeah, the Kenny
yeah.
Loggins
And
style.
like and also it's just so impressive for the Super Nintendo. Like I think the Super Nintendo sound chip in general is one of the things that makes that game like genuinely.
Oh yeah, it's so like just this is just signature
Hmm.
sound. Like even X2 and X3 never quite hit that level that X1s
Hmm.
did, you know.
Oh shit! I forgot what I
And,
was gonna. What? Sorry, what were you gonna say?
X2 is like X2 is like a little bit more
Hmm.
similar, but X3 really changed up that sound in like with the sound chip. It has like more kind of squeaky, shrilly guitars
Oh.
in it.
Mm.
And so that definitely changed the dynamic a little bit of it. A lot of people say it's like the X3 soundtrack sucks, and I don't agree, but it's not as classic as the first. Like the first was all over the place. Like you have like these crazy synth
Hmm.
sounds and like Boomer Kuwanger's stage. You have the shredders like Spark Mandrill or Flame Mammoth or Storm Eagle even, which is like that's very
Yeah.
Kenny Loggins. That kind of wank almost like the fast paced like Van Halen-y kind of
Yeah.
wank. uh, and then you have like more atmospheric tracks like the first Sigma stage. Oh man, that like little intro, dude, that like delayed reverby key intro is so
Mm.
good. So that soundtrack had scope, and I think that that's a big part of it too. Like a big part of the comfort feeling of that game is like, the potential of what could be done
Hmm.
because it was 93. You know, it's like check out these cool synth tones and check out this new gameplay and you know we're bringing the frontier here, man. This is the future. The future is now. It's 20xx.
Mm.
So I don't know. I wonder how that translates to younger audiences who are playing these games for the first time now.
Well, I think to me, like I know that I'm definitely, the closest thing I was to being alive in the '90s was being in my mom's womb, but um, but
Yeah.
I was never alive during the '90s, and I don't know if I necessarily feel like a nostalgia for it, but I think you know, I'm definitely in the minority in thinking that sometimes game soundtracks with that older SNES, specifically the SNES sound card, but generally the 16-bit sound effects are often better than like some of the modern like fully orchestrated ones. But
Yeah, because there's just so much charm
mhm.
to that. I almost feel like it fits Mega Man a little bit better. That's why I like Seven soundtrack so much, because it's kind of a blend of that 16-bit style with the very like kind of simplistic brightness
Mhm.
of the 8-bit sound, and then you start to see like I don't know from X4 onward, maybe not X4 as much. It just kind of became very like oh here's some shredding and some solos. There's a lot of that, unfortunately, in it.
Mhm. So, um, what is one like vivid memory that you have with this game? Like, obviously, you talked about the Nintendo Power, you talked about speedrunning, you talked about embarrassing yourself at your friend's place recently, but what's like another vivid memory that you have with
Hmm.
this game?
Uh, one of my best friends growing up, whom I still see whenever he's in town, we became friends because of Mega
Mm-hmm.
Man. I was like talking to somebody about Mega Man, like, talking at someone about Mega Man, and then this kid comes up. He's like, "Hey man, were you talking about Mega Man?" I was like, "Yeah, you're my best friend now." So I owe him that. Uh, it's another thing too is Sable, who was one of our co-hosts in the beginning when we first started, and he was there throughout all the Mega Man stuff. He he described he like roasted me actually for being like that kind of like nostalgia pandering. Like it was a warm winter night, and I was by the hearth of my grandmother's place, and then I saw on the grainy CRT was Mega Man X, you know, like
Uh,
that kind of shit. And I definitely fall a little victim to that. I definitely remember I could trace like seasons to different levels in
mm,
that game. You know, like I remember it being super cold and me being like under a blanket playing Mega Man X, this the Central Highway song in
mm-hmm.
my head. And I remember like it being super hot and playing Chill Penguin stage or Launch Octopus's stage, being like, I wish I was in water. Very like sensory
Uh-huh.
memories like that. Man, I you, being put on the spot is hard for this, isn't it? Uh, I also, this is a strange thing. I remember writing the passwords to, like, I don't know, maybe the all upgrades, all sub tanks, weapons, password. I remember writing it in marker in my instruction
Uh-huh.
booklet, which definitely devalues a lot of a lot of it. But I remember like kind of like learning sort of how to write numbers around that time, like more clearly. So I just like that weird muscle memory of, like writing those numbers in the manual just as I was learning. It was like my practice almost in it. So thanks, Mega Man X, for teaching me
Do you
numbers.
still have that instruction book?
Oh yeah, it looks like shit. It looks like I think I may have spilled water on it too.
Mm.
I mean, my other than that, like the box is in perfect shape. I have all the stuff that came with it. The cart works fine. Same with X2 and X3, but N7 and soccer, unfortunately. Which have you ever
No.
played that? Are
That's the
you aware of
GameCube
its
one, right?
existence? Oh no, that's Super
Oh, that was
Nintendo.
on what? What am I? I'm thinking of Battle
Yeah,
Network,
it's
I
pretty
think.
fun. Yeah, network
Oh,
transmission
yeah.
is probably what you're thinking of. No, Mega Man Soccer is, you got to play it sometime. Play it on like emulator or something. It's pretty fun. It's trash.
But it's like
But
Sonic
it's
Adventure
fun.
2. Trash.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's another can of worms,
Yes.
isn't it? I think a lot of my nostalgia for, part of me also, I think I'm like past the big nostalgia phase of my adult years, but because I think like 5-6 years ago I was way more indulgent in it, and now I don't really care that much. I don't know. There's a lot of theory about like, and just the word itself of nostalgia being kind of tied to like depression in a
Yeah.
way. Like you're
You're,
chasing of
you're
it.
chasing something that you used
How
to have when you feel like you were better off. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The whole idea of like regression is tied into that. Like you want to return to a place when you felt safe or happy and childlike.
Yeah.
And even like nostalgia in and of itself is bittersweet, right? So I don't know if that's just me growing up or like just being more healthy mentally, but I think I have more memories tied into Mega Man X or Mega Man as a whole rather than just Mega Man X. Because I think I probably conflate some memories of X with X2 or X3 or even Mega Man 1, here and there.
So this is the part of the show where, speaking of memories, where I ask people on Twitter about some of their memories and things that they associate with whatever we're talking about. And so far, it looks like, I think it's only one response so far, and it's from Solar Man, like the Mega Man boss SSB, at Solar Man SSB on Twitter. And he says, I really like how Vile is used in this game as this super dangerous force at the start, and then as you go through more stages, you get stronger and take him down after he kills Zero. This is done even better in the remake with Vile receiving actual character.
Ooh, so I want to pick at that a little bit, to be honest, because you don't take down Vile. The only reason why you take down Vile is because Zero like sacrifices himself so you can do it. The whole point of that second Vile fight is that you're still not strong enough to beat him, and Zero's still better than you. So it's like only when Zero blows his ass up to blow up the mech, and that's when you fight Vile 1v1.
In like Sigma 1,
and
right?
There's like a
Or 2.
It's Sigma 1, yeah. And there's a couple other things to that too that are a little bit meta, because like maybe Vile's the same way. He's relying on another piece of technology, just like Zero is. Oh, actually, no, Zero's not a Reploid technically, so never mind. That analogy goes out the window. But but yeah, I mean, I guess that is important to consider. And also another thing too, if you get the arm cannon upgrade before you go and fight Vile, it's a little different because you don't take Zero's blaster then. You've acquired it yourself, which I think is like a really cool like emergence.
Yeah,
like,
because
plot
again,
point
like
there.
you said, it's all about how you're not strong enough to defeat Vile. So then, showing showing that you chasing after Zero isn't just like, isn't always gonna be remedied by Zero giving you something is pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly, and that depends on whether or not you, the player, were good enough to make that jump to get the blaster. So there's a lot of things that tie into that. But Vile's a really cool character, I think, and I think I'm not the biggest fan of. Oh, I guess we didn't really talk about this, but Maverick Hunter X in general.
I didn't even know that existed.
I'm not the biggest fan of it. So it's a remake. It's good. I mean, it's like a 1-to-1 remake, but like they added a bunch of extra features. Like there's more character development. There's like the anime, the Day of Sigma OVA that's included in the X Legacy collection. That was in it. It's like a prequel, like 30 minutes, maybe not even that long. Little OVA about like Mavericks and the Sigma virus. Yeah, it's cool, dude. You should watch it. You should. It takes place before Mega Man X, obviously. And Vile is playable in that game. There's like a Vile mode. Cool. But like, if you like Vile, check out X8 because he's a big part. X3 and then X8 because he's a big part of both of those games. I mean, not big. But, sorry.
So is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you feel like is super relevant or that you like to talk about at all?
I think one thing that really never gets touched on maybe is sort of how sound effects are used in this game. Like, you have very distinct sound effects with everything in it. And it's like a lot of times some of the effects are modulated or different versions of old Mega Man sound effects, or at least are like tonally or sonically similar to them. Like the charge shot, it's like the when you're charging it up, it's kind of similar to the old Mega Man sound, but it's like just a little bit more enhanced. Or like the sound that bullets make or lemons make when they hit stuff is like such a satisfying, unique sound. Like that blaster sound, like they knew that sound was gold, man, because even when you select things in the menu, it shoots out a blaster. So I think there's a lot to break down in terms of the way of the sound design in this game that even I never really talk or think about. Other than that, that's pretty much it. Was that the only fielded comment?
Yeah, that's
from
the only
Twitter?
response I've gotten. It's so weird because sometimes I'll ask something about something that I feel is super niche, and I'll get like a bunch of responses, and then I'll ask something about like Mega Man X where it's like I feel like so many people have played this, and then just get one response, which is so strange.
Well, that's kind of how. It's honestly like sort of what I've been struggling with during this episode. Like, I love talking to you about this, but I feel like whenever I talk about Mega Man X, I feel like so many people have said a lot of the same stuff before, and then I'm like regurgitating. Not that that makes my experience invalid or anyone else's experience invalid, but it's just kind of trite in a way. A lot of my experience with Mega Man is very much like seen before or heard before. That's why I think it's really cool to have you as a contrast, because it's like you just discovered this, like, or you just started playing
like
them rather a couple years ago.
Well, I think so that's another part of my goal with this podcast is like I feel that most of the things that have been said, not just on this episode, but most episodes aren't inherently original or new. In fact, I think that a lot of the things that have been said are probably tired. but I think that that framing them around people's memories is like the important part and kind of like you said, the thesis of this podcast. So
Totally, yeah. It's funny how much, like, I feel like one of the big reasons why, like 16-bit, 18-bit games
mhm.
were are so like tied to nostalgia wasn't just like the things we were talking about before, but because of how minimalist, or maybe not minimal, but like limited game design elements were back then, it's easier to tie that in
Yeah.
with a memory of a sensory memory, whether it be a smell or a taste or a feeling or whatever, because there's just less. Like, for example, all right, let's say I'm playing FF15. I don't really have a lot of sensory memories of playing
Mhm.
FF15 apart from like a particularly emotional part in the game. You know, I just like the game does its thing. I don't really have a lot of like like physical
Mhm.
connections to it. But I definitely remember playing Secret of Evermore for the first time in my basement. And I remember like kind of the cold air feeling, or like the grandmother's hearth on a cold November night. I mean, like, I'm
Mhm.
being facetious, but also I do tie those memories to that. And I think the way that your brain forms these connections and these heuristics with like media is just a little easier when there's less things on the
Mhm.
screen and more bright things and more symbolic things rather than everything at 4K resolution and super high def, and you can see like Link's pubes slowly protruding from his tunic, which you can't see, but I'm sure somebody's drawn it. You know, but
Yeah,
you
no,
get
I
my
feel
point,
you.
right? Like you,
I think what's interesting about that is I think the most um for me the most like sensory memory that I have with a video game is Halo 4 and Cherry Sours.
oh, I mean that's a combo, man.
It's a very strange combo, but a combo nonetheless. But yeah, that's like that for me. That's like the only one, that and like Easter candy with Black Ops 2, um, which is so weird.
Oh, what about that? Was it? Yeah, it was Mountain Dew. It was Mountain Dew with Halo 4. Didn't Mountain Dew release like a bunch of promo stuff for Halo 4 when that first came out, like XP codes and things? I remember getting Halo 4 day one, and I think buying a bunch of Mountain Dew for
Yeah, I
it.
think I would assume so, but again, like Halo 4 came out when I was like I think like 13, so I have no idea.
That is a fucked up sensory memory. Here is this like poison that tastes
Whoa.
awful and it burns and also gives you diabetes. But like, what a sensory memory! I didn't mean to trash talk
Oh,
your
I
drink
thought you
of
were talking about
choice.
cherry sours. I thought you were talking about cherry sours. No, I don't
Oh
even drink soda
no,
anymore.
no, I meant like Mountain Dew being tied to somebody's
Oh
sensory
God,
memory of something.
well, I have that too, but not with a game.
With
Um,
what?
there's a really good, like I think the best place to get Rubens in Milwaukee, is a place that I've gone pretty frequently. Like, or I went to pretty frequently with my dad when I was a kid. And it's like this like old Irish dive bar. On like, I think if anyone is in the Milwaukee area, I think it's on like 34th and North, or something like that. It's called McBob's, and I have such visceral memories of like Mountain Dew, like picking up a glass of Mountain Dew, like sitting on like one of those like outdoor tables where it's kind of like chain link almost table, or the tabletop is like made out of like almost
Uh
kind of
huh.
chained together metal, and like the sound of that sliding off and like drinking that is like so ingrained in my memory because Mountain Dew was my drink of choice for so long as a kid.
Yeah, I definitely remember drinking a ton of it while playing Time Splitters 2. Because I remember, this is a lot grosser than yours, but I
Uh huh.
remember like burping and tasting the burp while playing through Time Splitters 2, and there's like this very specific type of map in that game that whenever I see it, it like kind of makes me feel sick because I think of that burp. So that's I'm like, this is it's going deep. I guess one's like relating it back to memory and a game like Mega Man. The idea of like procedural memory, right? Like the sort of being able to like sort of recall things like it's like riding a bike. That's that phrase that defines procedural memory. How much of that is tied to 2D
Oh my God, yeah.
platformers, and how much of that plays into your ability to form these heuristics? Like, this is another reason why I think 8-bit games and 16-bit games and even 32-bit games like just hit different, because it's just easier to recall simpler muscle memory.
I remember like I woke up like
else.
I think Wednesday of this past week, and I was like, I'm gonna play Super Mario Brothers, and I sat down and I played the original Super Mario Bros for like 30-40 minutes. I just did a whole run.
And you just slammed it, right? It was there.
Yeah.
The memory was there. I have trouble sometimes with that kind of stuff. This is why, like when I played Smash, if I didn't play, I would just suck. Like if I went like 4 days without playing, I would just suck for like a solid couple hours after coming back. And maybe I wasn't getting better. Maybe I was it was like some Muhammad Ali shit where like float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, where I wasn't getting better, but I was just exhausting my opponent. And like doing better because of that, my performance is increasing. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's a really interesting concept. I really appreciate your inviting me to this, because I love talking about the way that memory pertains to games, and I would like to do it in a way that isn't just I like Mega Man X because it's a cool game and it makes me feel nostalgic. So it's been a fun analysis in that sense.
Yeah, for sure. All right. What was I gonna say? Oh, yeah. So Joey, we have reached the part of the podcast where you get to plug all the awesome things you're doing out on the internet. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about some of the creative stuff you're up to?
Well, first of all, if you can subscribe to my OnlyFans. No, I'm kidding. Like, is that a thing? I'm sure it's a thing with like a dude who's successful at it. But either way, I'm actually, this is a good thing to plug. I just built a new PC. I'm just getting some new gear. I'm going to maybe start trying to make some video reviews or something similar to that. But most of the time I'm tweeting about stuff. So you can find me at Twitter, at twitter.com/podcastjump. Also streaming on Twitch. I've been playing through FF14 and a couple other games here and there. Maybe I'll stream Mega Man. I'll do a Mega Man marathon at this point now that I can. I have the means to do so. But you find me at twitch.com/Joey Jump and Shoot. So JOIE
And
Jump and Shoot.
just to make sure that people got that, that's twitch.tv, not twitch.com. Sorry, not to be pedantic, but in case people are Googling links like it's fucking 20 years ago.
Dude, this is what I get for drinking cold brew at 7 p.m. It like awakens my inner boomer. Yeah. Hey, son, are you winning on twitch.com? Twitch.com, yeah. That's probably my OnlyFans link right there. It's not what you wanted to see. Other than that, yeah, those are the big ways to contact me. Twitter especially, it's probably where I'm the most active.
All right, and I'll have links to everything that Joey talked about down below in the description for this episode of the podcast. And if you're coming here from Twitter, I also will have him added in the post when I have this post up, so you can find him via any of those means or just by searching up the link. And you can find me on Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram at CHAS_MKE. That's Chaz Milwaukee. And you can find me on YouTube at just Chaz, that's Chas. And if you haven't already, make sure to drop a follow or a subscribe or whatever the podcast service that you're listening on calls it, because we really appreciate it and it really helps out the show a lot, especially for like numbers and like, you know, figuring out what everyone likes to hear and likes to hear us talking about or hear us talk about. So I'd really appreciate that. And if you haven't already, also please come check us out on Anchor. That's kind of the service that I'm using to host all of these episodes, and I think it's probably the place that has the most like different options and stuff you can do with the show. So I'd really appreciate it if you checked it out there. Anyways, thank you all very much for watching. Be nice to all the essential workers and people in your life, and please wear a mask. Peace out.